Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 on Tuesday, the 16th of April, so we will commence. I appreciate that the dynamic has changed a little bit as we're in a slightly smaller room, so please be mindful of the fact that the microphones are on in the room and recording and may well pick up comments made under one's breath, so to speak. Particularly welcome to members of the public who are viewing from another room and members of the press. I shall introduce the officers. On my right, we have Mr. Ollie Bolter, who's the Strategic Manager for Planning and Infrastructure. Next to him, Ms. Sarah Wilkinson, who is the Planning Development Manager. We have Mr. Richard Peats from Historic England, Mr. Neil Troughton from the Highways Representative, Ben Gard on my left, our Legal Advisor, and Ari Bartlett, who is our Committee Clerk, and Councillor Paul Fuller, who is the Cabinet Member for Planning, Coastal Protection and Flooding. A few housekeeping notices. There are no planned fire drills during this meeting, so if you hear the fire alarm, it's a real emergency, and evacuate the building via the nearest escape route, which is via the signposted set of stairs to your left as you leave the conference room. Exit via the door at the High Street and proceed to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. If it's not used in the event of an emergency, please don't re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a member of council staff. If anyone has mobile phones, if you could just check that they are switched off or to mute. Members of the committee will be aware that they cannot leave the meeting during the presentation or the debate on an application, and if you do leave that, you will be unable to vote. Members of the public, both in this room and in the other and watching virtually, you are here simply to observe the process. And won't be permitted to speak unless you've registered to speak in advance. So I shall run through the speaking process. Do we have a system? Okay, so we're going to have, rather than our typical green lights, red lights, amber lights, Marie is going to indicate the time issues, and I will flag those as well. So we move now then to the substantive agenda. We have had apologies from Councillors Stewart, Oliver, Richardson and Quirk, and there are no other changes to membership. Right, straight on then to the minutes from our last meeting. Are there any comments, addendums? Councillor Cox.
Through on page 3, it says a recommendation was made and duly seconded to approve the application subject to the provision of at least 70% affordable rented accommodation in perpetuity. I believe at that meeting it was 35% of affordable housing, of which 70% would be affordable rented accommodation perpetuity on both of the applications.
Yes.
Just check Sarah's on.
Take advice.
Yes, so it's 70% of the 35%.
Yes.
Yes, it may be that we can tighten up the wording. I can give some wording for that.
Subject to that, Chairman.
Yeah, subject to
that.
Okay.
Yes.
Be perfectly happy to have 70%.
Okay. All in favour of approving the minutes with that slight amendments? Favour? Against? Splendid. Carried. We'll sign those. Declarations of interest. Any declarations? No, excellent. We move then to public question time. So if anyone in the public gallery has a question, please raise their hands. No public questions have been received prior to this meeting. A few minutes given the, this is a slight change to our usual structure. But no, okay.
No questions, Chairman.
No questions? Excellent. So we move to agenda item 5, in which is our planning report. This is in relation to two matters, but substantively in relation to the Norris Castle developments, and you have that before you. I shall invite Ms. Wilkinson then to present on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for information, you should have in front of you, I think there's one share between two, the master plan layout. I thought it was useful as there's a number of elements to see if you had that with you to work through the numbering. I will try and remember to direct you to the number on the plan of the element of the development I'm talking about as and when, but you should be able to follow it on the master plan in front of you. The application site, as shown by the red line on the slide in front of you, is an area of 76 hectares, just to the east of the Norris estate itself covers an area of approximately 60 hectares, shown in the orange and the red, while the Spring Hill estate element of the application site is around 16 hectares. I've incorporated a Google Earth image as well because I thought that might just be quite helpful, and I refer to smaller sections of it as we work through the presentation. The application itself is to cover the two areas. It is part outline. Oh, sorry, I'm going to go back one. I've included this plan that just shows those assets that are listed. So the application incorporates 2 grade 1 listed assets, which are the castle and the farmstead. There are then 8 grade 2 listed buildings, which I'll work through as we go through the presentation. And the site itself is a grade 1 registered park and garden. Just for information and interest, potentially, Osborne House Park and Garden is a grade 2 star listed, while this park and garden is a grade 1 set. The Spring Hill estate is a locally registered park and garden. I've incorporated a number of visual images that have been provided as part of the visual impact assessment submitted with the application. So this shows the position of those. There are some Norris views, which are in this area here, 1, 2, 3, 4, looking into the site. There are a number of Spring Hill views. Those I will talk about later in the presentation when I deal with the Spring Hill outline elements of the application. And there is also some long distance views, which I will work through as well. I'm just going to go back one. Nope, the slides come out. So I'm going to do it as part of this slide. Apologies, councillors. The application site for the 2 areas, the Norris part of the site is the full element of the application. That plan is replicated within your report on page 17 that shows the Norris element, which is the full element of the application. In terms of number of units in that element, we're looking at a hotel complex of around 74 suites. 68 resort residences around the site. There are then 33 spa residences within the farmstead complex, and outline consent on the Spring Hill element of the site for 105 units. So that's the total development. Obviously, it also incorporates other associated elements, including the landscape restoration and the proposed facilities to run with those resort residences and that hotel, such as a spa, a wellbeing centre, and a number of restaurants and other facilities. We'll work through them as we work through the presentation. I'm not going to necessarily talk at these slides. We did a detailed virtual site visit, and you will have seen a number of these as part of that process. But what I have included is the viewpoints that have been included as part of the visual impact assessment submitted with the application. And they correlate to the numbers that are shown on this slide. So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we move through those, looking, you can hopefully see them, the markers on it. So we have the Norris estate wall in this image, and South Lodge, which is located just alongside the entrance into the site from New Barn Road. We saw that during the virtual site visit. The lower image is actually looking coming down just through that entrance, where you have the Norris wall at this point on the site, the farm in here, we've got the sea down here, and the 2 pillars that we discussed that go between the proposed development of this field and the rest of the estate. We then have those entrance gates, which is the 3rd view, and then a view looking towards from Pier Road, which is within the adjacent estate, looking across with the farmstead in this position. And here are the properties on New Barn Road for locational purposes, looking across the site. We then have some long distance views looking from the Solent, and some further views looking over here, apologies, from West Cowes. And then the views from Cowes, I should say, And then the views from the shoreline of Cowes looking across at the shoreline of East Cowes. Spring Hill House being here, the old convent as we know it, again in this image, the caravan park alongside the proposed entrance road, and then the Spring Hill farm cottages, which form part of what we've referred to as P4 within the report. We will get to that in a moment when we talk about the Spring Hill development. Some further views from the Solent looking at the castle and the existing remains of the seawall that runs along the boundary. Further views from those points as we work around the coastline. You'll see some of those coming back into the presentation as we get to the specific elements of the scheme further along. I've included an image of the master plan, but obviously you have that in front of you for reference, but I will refer to it as we move along. The first element I'm going to discuss, and apologies, I'm not doing it in the order they appear on the master plan. I'm doing it in the order they appear in the report and in the evaluation. So hopefully it's easier to follow that way. And we're going to start with number 4, which is the as stated previously, the castle is a grade 1 listed building. The application seeks consent to convert it into 17 hotel suites, as well as a bar, a lounge, a restaurant, and other associated facilities. I will move through some images that show the castle. These are taken over various different times and ages. We did do quite a detailed photographic survey during the virtual site visit, so I've only incorporated a few just as a reminder as we work. From effectively showing every angle of the building externally, the view of the building from the Solent looking up at it, and then some internals. We did quite a detailed assessment of these on Friday, but I've included some of the key features that we looked at and discussed. You have the kitchen, the roof detailing, the bookcases within the library, and the open courtyard area, or the roofed courtyard area, I should say, as well as the stairwell and the cellar. And then some images of some original features and some unusual features within the building. And then some further images just showing the nature of the damage that is currently can be seen within the building, and the condition of it at the moment, which is a significant factor of the application, and one of the fireplaces. Moving through the scheme, as discussed, the application sees the conversion of the hotel into the conversion of the castle, into a hotel facility. I've included some floor plans. Again, we looked at the existing floor plans on Friday, showing the different room configuration. In essence, the yellow elements on this plan show the spa facility, whereas the green are showing the more open public areas, the brown elements showing the kitchens. And then we have at this point a lounge bar, and then which has some private rooms off it. That lounge bar would then have a glazed roof, which would provide a courtyard restaurant at that first floor level as we move up. So in essence, this curved element you see on the floor plan is this curved element of this end of the building here. So the restaurant, the open courtyard restaurant, would be effectively on just behind these crenellations that you see there. And this inner curve is the inner curve of the ground floor of that. So the restaurant roof, in essence, would sit above the doors of this part of the curve. The first floor would provide more suites accommodation, as well as a restaurant within the roofed courtyard we looked at. Moving through, again, we have more suites, and then I know that we were discussing during the site visit, the walkway. This is the walkway, which would effectively sit above the restaurant and would provide further facilities. I've included a few more of the area of the courtyard restaurant, because it is a key element of the kind of comments made within the officer report. So I thought it would be helpful as you look down on that feature. It's also referenced within the update paper in terms of comments from the additional letter of representation. In essence, the floor would be coming in part way across that opening to provide the first floor restaurant facility. I've included some cross sections which I thought might be useful to better understand how some of the elements are going to link and attach. Also included some detailing in terms of the proposals because this is both a planning application and a listed building consent. This is a joint report, it is a joint presentation. I've included some internal details and specifically in relation to this plan, it shows the proposal to in essence line the rooms in order that they can incorporate the features required for it to be a functioning hotel in terms of the sprinkler system and the everything would be held effectively in the voids above a fake ceiling that would be incorporated. In essence, the rooms being put in a box which would be constructed around a stud metal frame with plasterboard attached. That is referenced in the report and concerns regarding that, so I felt it was important to show you this detail in the presentation so you can better understand how that frame would work within the room. I've also incorporated this plan that shows the parking and also links to the next element of the presentation, which is where I'll discuss the Castle Crescent being proposed, which is number 5 on your master plan. In essence, the parking for the site will be incorporated within the farm complex where the modern barns are, which I will get to later. There is 107 space car park within that area. However, the proposal does incorporate some parking closer to the hotel, closer to the castle itself, and some drop-off areas, as well as the entrance into the proposed hotel, which would be within the crescent in this area. I will discuss that in more detail in a moment. But in essence, there is this curved drive area that would be added to the existing curved drive. So where on the Google view you see Millfield Avenue, a route would come from that to provide a small area of parking and then some dropping off spaces through here and effectively in and out for that element of the site within this area of the existing kind of pleasure gardens. As stated, I'll move on to the Castle Crescent. I've incorporated this image because I think it's useful to get an idea of what the report refers to as the bowl. We talk about the crescent being located in the bowl on the site as it is at a lower land level to the castle itself. We looked at this on Friday, but I thought it'd be helpful to include a few images that just show the relationship between the castle, that bowl, and the wider park and garden. Again, some images from that angle looking up from that lower land level and that bowl and the existing tree belt in that area. The proposal, as the description indicates, is a crescent shape that follows through. It is this part of the site that then will link to the castle terrace, which I will discuss after this, and then sits within this bowl area in this point. Again, just an image showing some floor plans of that proposed area. So there would be 2 stories of rooms, of suites, and then as well as a conferencing areas of conference centre in the corridor that would then link to the terrace. And the proposed reception, which would be one of the main receptions into the facility. Just some more detailed floor plans there for the suites. There would be what they're calling senior suites and junior suites, so there would be different sizes, and a cross section of the proposed crescent. What is also incorporated is these chimney features. I want to include an image of these because they are referenced within the report and the concerns that officers have raised with regards to those. Apologies. What you will also see in this larger cross section, which shows more of the building itself, is this element here. This is referred to in the report. This is a sculptural glass shape to define the reception, but the plans indicate that the design of that will be developed further later. So all we have at the moment is this glass structure that would sit above the proposed crescent, to which the design of that would be developed further. And then the same could be said of the elevational treatment of this element. We have some indicative images of what the design could be like. They incorporate some lightweight balconies and potential screens to assist with light spillage, but we have no definitive elevation designs for this element of the scheme. I've incorporated the upper image, which shows the proposed crescent in relation to the proposed terrace, but we will get to the terrace shortly. But that shows the information we do have in relation to the scale and mass of the proposed crescent in effectively cross sections at all angles. I've included this image. Apologies for the quality, certainly of this one. It hasn't reproduced very well when being zoomed in. But in essence, this shows the trees that would be removed as part of the construction of the crescent. That is referenced in the report in terms of the red trees, in essence, are the ones that would be removed to facilitate the construction of that crescent. If I move on to the proposed castle terrace. This again, I've included this same image because I think it's useful to see the terrace would sit in front of the castle at the point of the cursor. The terrace would include 19 suites or 19 additional suites, as well as a swimming pool and various treatment rooms in association with the spa use of the hotel. I've included some images from standing within the castle, looking down at the terrace area. And then from all other angles, in essence, looking across at the terrace and the slope that then goes down to the shoreline, in essence. Again, I've included some floor plans of the proposed terrace area. You can see the swimming pool is located at the back of the site here in the slope itself, with then the rooms associated with that. Treatment rooms associated with that, apologies, and then some public rooms for conferencing. This is the linked corridor to the crescent. Those were the same conferencing rooms we saw in the previous slides, and then the suites that sit to the front of that. Then the first floor plan, and sorry, the cross-section elevations. This again is the elevation detailing we have in relation to the terrace. The green line that you see running along there, hopefully you can pick it out there. It will be shown better in a cross section shortly, is where the proposed landscaping would then be built up to look to screen the elevation for the terrace from the water. And hopefully you can see it in more detail here. So we have that cross section once again. We then have a bit more detail in terms of the actual elements of it. And then this being the cross section, as for a point, can see the swimming pool in this area, and then the suites at this point, and then the walkway above the terrace. This is the bank I'm referring to, which would be built up in order to then provide screening for the proposed terrace feature. Some more details that have been provided, which in essence, this element of the side shows the design development for this feature and how it has come to then look in the proposed manner. I've included some further cross sections. This lower section here, the yellow line showing the existing land level. And so this is what would be cut into to provide the terrace facility. The proposal seeks to use the terrace to provide additional stability to the land and the castle by using a structure to link to the proposed piles to provide an additional support for the land. That's discussed in the report. I won't go into it in any more detail during the presentation. We'll move on to the shoreline. This element of the site is split into various sections on your master plan. I'm going to firstly talk about the bathing house and the sea wall, which is number 1, and then we talk about the sentinels, which are number 3, before moving on to the coastal cottages, which is number 7. The sentinels, there are 4. I will talk about 3 that are of the same design before moving on to number 4, which sits within the coastal cottages, which is of a different design. I've incorporated this image. We did look at it on Friday, but I think it is useful to show the existing coastline as you look from the Solent. This is effectively either side of the bathing house. So the bathing house is that point as the site rolls around. Then you can just make out hopefully the sea wall as you move along that route. A closer up image of the bathing house as it currently is and the sea wall. And once again, the bathing house and the sea wall. The first 50 metres of the sea wall are listed, as is the bathing house, both grade 2. The proposal is to construct an 80 cover restaurant alongside the proposed bathing house or to the rear of the proposed bathing house in this area. So for information, this is the bathing house that we have just looked at and we looked at on Friday, as well as the 50-metre sea wall that runs along this point. And then the restaurant would sit behind it in this area here. The proposal does show a tree to be planted immediately in front of that. To be honest, I have some questions over the suitability of a tree in that position, but that is the proposal as part of the landscaping scheme. The application incorporates, so apologies, the restaurant would be linked to the bathing house, although the bathing house would just be effectively protected as it is today. There's no proposals it will be restored and cleaned up, hopefully, because as members noted on Friday, there is a bit of graffiti in relation to that, but there would be no proposal to incorporate it into the restaurant itself. So the restaurant would be attached to it and then would sit behind it. As you can see, the thick black line there, that is the boundary wall of the bathing house. And then there is an original wall positioned here at the point of the cursor. It is referenced in the report and the concerns of officers that actually by constructing the restaurant around that wall, it separates the bathing house from the wall of the bathing house as part of the scheme. But this provides a proposed 80 cover restaurant with associated kitchens and an outdoor seating deck. Cross section of that, once again, this element of the proposal does also seek to provide additional ground stability by constructing a large retaining wall to support the land behind it. The proposal, these plans, as councillors can show, do see a mezzanine and a roof going into the bathing house, but there are no proposals to utilise the bathing house to the best of our knowledge. And then the restaurant area in cross section. The bottom image shows the elevational treatment we have in relation to the bathing house as referred to in the report. It would have effectively metal cladding, very naturally rusted metal cladding to ensure that there was not unacceptable light spillage from the restaurant use into the Solent due to the site being located within an AONB. I will move on to the sentinels. There are 3 proposed of a very similar design and then 1 that's a very different design. So I'll talk about 1, 2 and 3. This image here is of the landing house. This, as the report references, is the inspiration for the design of the sentinels. So that is what they're seeking to replicate. That is located just outside the Norris red line within the Osborne Woods, in essence. So it's just to the west of the site. Then again, this is another image of that approaching from the water. I've included in it this image again, and then at the bottom here in relation to the castle. One of the sentinels is located very close to the bathing house, which is just on the edge of this image at the point of the cursor. You can just about make out the bathing house there. 2 are then located either side of the castle. So either side of the castle, you would have them framing that view upward, and that is 2 and 3 in terms of the sentinels. Hopefully this makes more sense. So you have 1 sentinel here, the bathing house being just off the plan. You then have 1 sentinel at this point. They're all marked number 3 on your master plan. 1 sentinel here, and then sentinel 4 within the Coast Guard village cottages, which is I'll talk about in a moment because it's a slightly different design. These being visual representations of those sentinels. Each sentinel would provide 5 resort residences. Again, showing those in visual form and cross section. As councillors can see from this bottom image, you would have the sentinel itself. It then has a bridge to the higher land, and then the land around it would be terraced to provide an amenity area. And some floor plans of that facility. Council will note we have a central area here, and each sentinel would also include a wellness suite. In order to provide access to the restaurant and the sentinels, it would be necessary to put in this track through what is currently an area of woodland. Much of that woodland is self-seeded, although it is most of it's self-seeded, and therefore the proposal is to remove the self-seeded trees from this. The green woodland shown on this plan is the ancient natural semi-woodland, is referred to in the report. The scheme does put development within its buffer zone, and this would be the access down to the sentinels, which would go through this area of woodland. It is proposed to remove much of this area of woodland, not only to provide that access track, but also to as part of the restoration of the parkland, in order to restore the views from Fort Norris, which is just off the screen, down to the Solent. I will work through that later. Proposal to access the sentinels and the restaurant would also include the removal of part of a natural ancient semi-woodland, as shown in red on this plan, with the orange being the buffer area of that natural ancient semi-woodland. I've included this bottom image, which just shows a bit more detail in terms of the surface finish of the proposed. This is the restaurant, and this is Sentinel 1, the proximity of those two elements, as well as the track that we're talking about that would access down to them. The track is not designed for vehicles. It's in essence designed for want of a better term, golf buggies. So electric buggies would pass around the tracks that run through the site that wouldn't be accessible. There is an element in the report that talks about concerns in relation to access for fire appliances, and that we have consulted the fire service and they state it does not comply, although the applicant says that they've consulted the fire service and they would be happy to access it via buggy. We haven't been able to corroborate that position. The following images show the proposed sentinels in wireframe. I've shown these just in relation to year 1. The visual impact assessment also looks at year 15, but the image is almost identical year 1, year 15, because there is no significant planting proposed within this area that would make that view significantly different. This being the view of the bathing house and the proposed restaurant being in wireframe. In this position, the tree I mentioned sitting directly in front of the restaurant. Sentinel 1 would then be located here. And then we move along and we have the castle, and Sentinel 2 and 3 framing that view, as well as the reconstructed seawall, which you can see in both of these images. Moving through, hopefully I'm not going too fast, bear with me. And I will move on to number 7 on the master plan, which is the coastal cottages. This area of the site, as you'll see, also includes a number 3 because it incorporates Sentinel number 4. This part of the site would include 9 resort residences, and including what is the 4th Sentinel, as well as a boathouse and a slipway. So it's this area that we're looking at here, which correlates with this area on the Google image. And some visuals of that. We have that gap that you can see from the Google image. So this area here, then hopefully you can see that there. We also have what has been referred to as either the summer house or the grotto, its name changes, in this area, which has been the factor as to the development of this part of the site, or the remains of it. Again, it is proposed to leave that as it is, and then build the proposed development around it. For locational purposes, this is the grotto or the summer house in this area. This being the proposed boathouse, the slipway in between that and proposed Sentinel 4, which, councillors, you will note is of a different design to the others. You then have 5 units at the front of the site or on the shore edge of the site, and then a further 3 units sat behind those. as well as an access track down and parking. We incorporated some plans to show the floor plans of those elements. These are the 5 coastal cottages that sit right on the shore edge, as well as Sentinel 4, which sits alongside those. So apologies, Sentinel 4 also includes 5 units, same as Sentinels 1, 2 and 3. We then have the remaining 3 coastal cottages which sit behind that row 5, and again of a slightly different design to the 5 at the front. These are the only elevations we have in relation to this element of the site and the scale of the units being proposed. You'll see the 5 coastal cottages here, the Sentinel, and then the 3 coastal cottages sat behind them here. This being the proposed boathouse and slipway between. Again, the visual impact assessment has incorporated a wireframe to show this as a finished view. Again, I've only incorporated year 1 because year 1 and year 15 are almost identical due to the lack of ability to plant or change that vista. But like for just locational purposes, this is the summer house we discussed before, the Grotto summer house. And then this is the proposed coastal cottages element of the development. We move on to the West Field, which is number 2 on your plan, just on the boundary with the Spring Hill Estate. So it runs through here, which is in essence this field here. We've already discussed this woodland, or this area of woodland that would be removed to facilitate views through from Fort Norris, which is here, down through to the Solent, as well as allowing for the access track to be provided down to the restaurant and the Sentinels. This area of the site would also incorporate 4 lodges, with the remaining proposed lodges located within this field, this field, this latter part. So what we have in this area of the site is 15 resort residences that would plus the conversion of one of the listed cattle shelters to a security lodge, which would sit alongside the proposed access road, and the other field shelter would be converted into a further lodge. The field shelters are both grade 2 listed, as are the watering holes. There are a number, or watering ponds, I should say, apologies. There are a number of those through the site, 2 located within this field, which would be restored as part of the development of this part of the site. I've again included a few images just as a reminder from Friday. This one shows this is one of the field shelters and this is the other one. So you can just see the breadth of the site that runs across between those. Some further images of the site looking down to the woodland, looking back up from the edge of the site to Fort Norris, and then a couple of images of the watering ponds, which again, as stated, are also grade 2 listed. We had a lot of photos on this on Friday, so I've only pulled out some specific ones. This plan on screen shows the proposed layout. As stated, there would be 4 lodges within this part of the site, and then the remainder sitting within this area. Lodges would be, I'll get to that plan in a moment, apologies, would be dug into the ground with ha-has around them and the land reprofiled to, in essence, seek to screen the impact of those lodges. Lodges would have 2 different floor footprints, one being these ones, which would be the kind of L shape, which is an upper floor and a lower floor plan. And then the other one, which would be the 4 sat within the woodland or the existing woodland, which is a more linear floor plan. And some cross sections showing those and how they would sit within that slope. As you can see, they are seeking to dig them in and then have them to have grass roofs, so they would sit within the profile of the revised profile of that field. They are also proposed to seek to add stability to the land. This is a further cross-section that shows a line through, in essence, which shows the bathing house here, the restaurant behind it, and then one of the lodges within the woodland behind that. You'll see these areas, so at the point of the cursor here, and then at the point of the cursor here, the plan delineates that clumps of self-seeded trees to be removed, and then that is shown in plan form. You can see the line of the cross section is that line that runs through the centre of that image there. And further cross sections, and again the reiteration of the orange showing the areas of woodland that would be removed, the 4 orange lines being the lodges themselves, this last bottom one being the proposed restaurant, and the woodland that would be removed to facilitate that. The upper element of this plan shows the proposed positioning of the lodges and the tracks between them, with this image showing the cross section through that part of the site. Hopefully you can see that red LA line that cuts through there. That is the cross section you're seeing there. I've included some images of the cattle shelters. As I said, these are both grade 2 listed in various different states of repair. One has a roof, one does not. Again, we have some existing floor plans of these buildings, this being the one without a roof and then the one with a roof. We have no proposed elevations of these buildings or floor plan. We have no floor plans or elevations as to how they would be converted into a security lodge or a security building or a lodge. We do have this image which shows that one of the cattle shelters would be converted and with addition. So the proposal would seek to extend this building in some way, but we have no details of that extension. We have no details of the final floor plan or elevations of what that would look like or entail. Moving on to the farmstead. Apologies. This element of the site is again a grade 1 listed building. The proposal seeks to convert it into a wellness centre with 33 resort residences, as well as a cafe, a gym and ancillary retail. We went through this quite a lot on Friday, but this is the farm element of the site, whereas this is the walled garden site. I have again incorporated a few images of the exterior of the farmstead, every angle as it were, and then some images of the interior of the from inside the walls looking out. Again, we spent a lot of time on this on Friday, so I haven't included them all. Just some details from various angles and elements of it. As stated, the proposal seeks consent to convert it into resort residences and a wellness centre. I've included some before and after floor plans. We did have the existing floor plans on Friday as point of reference, and this would be how that footprint would be utilised to incorporate those residences. As we discussed, I think we looked at this area of the site where this courtyard would be entirely enclosed to provide an additional unit, so it would be roofed, which we move on to the next plan, to show this roof to this area of courtyard. And then the other courtyards with the buildings around them, this being a first floor plan or a roof plan, depending on what building and what floor you're on. And then some visuals looking over at those elements of the building, which I thought were showed in a bit more detail. We then have some proposed elevations for reference, and I know we talked about this a lot on Friday in terms of we have like building 10 here, building 4, building 5, building 6, building 13, building 17, building 12, building 4 on this plan. We discussed those buildings and how they sit within this configuration on Friday. Again, we've got some elevations, how those elements would be incorporated into that footprint. Moving on to the walled garden, as stated in the report, this would incorporate additional resort residences, which would in essence be attached to the walls. They are proposed to form a structural support for those walls. I will show you some cross sections shortly. but they would sit in this configuration around the edges of that walled garden at 2 stories. That is the first floor plan. And hopefully, councillors, you can see this cross section. This is probably the easiest representation of it, where you have the wall, you then have the wall ties that would link then into this walkway, and then the 2-story element, which would provide the proposed structural support. But again, it's shown there and there. As can be seen in this image, if someone was walking on that terrace, they would be able to see over the wall, potentially. There is questions over whether the units would sit above the wall or not. There is contradiction between the plans because the wall is not an even height all around. So there are elements of the wall which are much lower. And so it's considered, as outlined within the report, that elements of the resort residences within the walled garden would be viewable above the wall. Again, some further images of some visuals of those, how they would sit within the walled garden, the unit types, and then what they would look like. You will see from this image, they are shown to be very, very close to the crenellations at the top of that wall. I've incorporated some cross sections to show the proposed wellness centre, which is supposed to be sat under the walled garden. We don't have any details. There it's not been surveyed under the walled garden, so we don't know what's under there in terms of original features. But the proposal would be to utilise that assumed space to provide the wellness centre and spa, as shown within these images. Again, you can see the resort residences along the edge, on the inside, the link between the and then the, again, resort residences and the walls of the castle at this point. Image showing the proposed reconstructed garden from the work, the accommodation, the proposed accommodation being in grey, with then the restored glass houses at this point, with the spa sitting below this area. This proposal seeks to incorporate a kind of rebuild, for want of a better term, the kitchen garden associated with this part of the site. I've incorporated this image because I think it's relatively useful in terms of providing information, as it shows in red the trees that are proposed to be removed as part of the walled garden proposal. Some of that is orchard, and the proposal would be to plant an orchard in this area of the site, as well as restoring some of the other features of the garden. In order to incorporate the spa, part of the walled garden, apologies, would be built a metre higher in order to allow for head height below. Moving on to the modern barns, these are located in this position here, so almost opposite the historic farm. And images of those are shown the other side. There is a very large barn that would be demolished. There is a smaller barn which would be converted to provide a buggy store for the electric buggies throughout the site, as well as the demolition of the barn. That would be replaced with 18 townhouses in this area. One of the listed ponds is located here, and that would again be renovated. There is also, as discussed previously, an 107 space car park within this area, and 4 farm workers' cottages within Woodland G4 on site. Sorry, this is number 10 on your master plan. We have no details at all of the farm workers' cottages. Moving on to the other units within this part of the site where the barn would be demolished, the townhouses. We do have elevational treatments for these, for the front elevations of these, and they would be 3-story townhouses as shown on the plan. And then some floor plans and cross sections of that. The townhouses would include a games, gym, cinema and wellness room, as well as 4 bedrooms and an open plan lounge, kitchen, diner area. Visuals have been again provided as part of wireframes as part of this element of development. The upper image showing the existing with the large barn here, which is thought to be demolished. The smaller barn here, which would be reclad to provide the buggy store. And then you can just see the bailiff's house, which I think is building 12 within the farm complex here. The lower image showing the 3-storey resort, the 3-storey townhouses that would be constructed to replace that one. That's year 1. I have included this image, which is the same image at year 15 as part of the visual impact assessment. Officers are somewhat challenged by this representation on the basis that the wire frames don't show building materials, and therefore officers consider that it is likely that you would still get views of the townhouses. Nonetheless, this is showing it from one vista, where you could potentially over time screen it. Moving on to the southwest field. This is number 12 within the master plan. This area of the site is here. So this field, in essence, is the southwest field. We talked about it on Friday. This line here being that wall that we showed at the beginning of the presentation and the pillars here. This is southwest field. The application seeks consent to construct 15 4-bedroomed houses within this field in a semicircular arc configuration with a communal open space in the middle. Of 3 different design types, you have type 1, type A, type B, and type C. And then I've again included a visual of the tree plan that shows in red those that are being removed. So there's not huge numbers of removal in this part of the site. And some visuals that have been provided. So again, we have the existing situation. We looked at this image earlier in the presentation. The wall sits here with the pillars at this point. We then have the wire frames in this area. And then again, we have proposed year 1 and proposed year 15. Again, this doesn't show the form of the building, it shows it as a wire frame, so you don't have the materials being visible through. But some screening would be possible by year 15. We'll move on to the pump house. This forms part of the landscape restoration of the site. Sorry, bear with me. Apologies. The pump house, which sits, this is the blue dot, is the pump house. It sits within this area of woodland between the castle and the farm, at the point of the cursor. And this is also a grade 2 listed building. I've included various images of this. These were taken in 2016, so it was in a better state of repair than it is now. But I think because there's been clearance around them at the point of this image, it shows the building more clearly. I've then included some more up-to-date representational images of the building as it is today. And then some internal images. We looked at a number of internal images on Friday, so I've only incorporated a selection. The proposal is to convert this building into a clubhouse. But again, we have no floor plans and no external elevations, so we are not clear what is necessary to convert it into a pump house. This does form a reason for refusal in the officer report, or a recommended reason for refusal. There are concerns that although it indicates that there would be limited alterations needed for it to be a clubhouse, there are a significant number of original features contained within this building, some of which are referenced specifically within the listing. There is also a large well, it being a pump house, and all the features around the pumps and the wheels. And therefore officers are concerned that we don't have any information in terms of how they would be incorporated within the design of a clubhouse. Moving on to the proposed landscape restoration. As stated previously, the Norris Estate is a Grade 1 registered park and garden. The Spring Hill Estate is a locally listed park and garden. The image to the right of the screen, this image shows the park and garden designation, which is all the little trees. So it does cover the entirety of the Norris Estate. And this image shows some of the landscape restoration proposals, including the removal of some of the self-seeded woodland in this area and the removal of some self-seeded woodland in this area, which would allow for the views of the castle from the Solent to be restored, as well as various pockets of removal of self-seeded woodland, and then planting to add to that and reinforce the designed landscaping from the time it was implemented. I've included a further image of that because this shows different landscaping. So I wanted to include this because this shows a significant amount of planting in and around the walled garden. Previous slide doesn't show that. Therefore, I felt it was important to include that to show there does appear to be a proposal to incorporate planting within that area to mitigate for the loss of some of those trees. Access to the site. The application, see, this is in two forms. So you've got the access onto the esplanade here, which then links to this part, which runs through the Spring Hill Estate, through just to the north of the cattle shelter, which would be used as a security lodge, into and joins that curved driveway we looked at on Friday, and the other routes down to the sentinels and the bathing houses and whatnot. This plan is showing all those access routes. So the application does seek consent for a junction off a priority junction off the esplanade. The report references the concerns that we have over this in relation to flood risk. Councillors, you will all know well how the esplanade floods. And the proposal of the shoreline management plan to not renew the sea wall in this area and therefore potentially allow the route to fail over time. And this is a concern as it would be the main route into the site. This shows that access route running through. The application refers to the fact that it shares the access with the Southern Water Pumping Station. This is the access into the Southern Water Pumping Station. The road currently comes up here and turns into there. So it would be extended into the site with turning points off it, which would provide access into the proposed land parcels that form part of the outline element of the scheme, which I will get to later. This plan is the details we have in relation to the New Barn Road and Old Road Junction, New Barn Road, Old Road Junction being here, this being the New Barn Road, which shows various build outs being constructed along the road, allow for the fact that it's not wide enough. This entrance to the site would be used for vehicles and cyclists, as well as an emergency access to the castle, and it would provide access to the proposed 15 resort residences within the southwest, not resort residences, the 15 private market houses within the southwest field. They would be accessed via New Barn Road. The rest of the development would be accessed via the esplanade. Other works are also proposed to Old Road to facilitate the use of this for that additional traffic. It's discussed a lot in detail in the report, so I'm not going to go into it in more detail here. Further work is also proposed to the junction with Cambridge Road and Old Road to improve the visibility displays. Again, I've included the tree plan just to show any tree removal that would be occurring in order to facilitate this access point. Moving on to Spring Hill. This is the outdoor element of the scheme. And I will move through some images. So in essence, this is the plan I was looking for earlier, actually, with the green showing the full element of the application and the pinky purple showing the outline element of the application. The image of the Google showing the Spring Hill Estate. Hopefully, I'll move on to it in terms of a more detailed plan, but just at the while we've got the Google image, you've got parcel 1, parcel 2, parcel 3 and parcel 4. And you can quite clearly see those in terms of the field boundary layouts and the tree belts. You've got parcel 1, parcel 2, Here you've got parcel 3 and parcel 4. I've included some images of that access point off the esplanade. It sits just alongside this building here, running up to where Southern Water currently access their site. I've then included some visuals of the tree belt that currently sits between the children's play area along that frontage and the proposed development. It is behind this tree belt that proposed P1 would be located, so parcel 1 would be located, which proposes to bring forward 55 senior living units. We'll get to that though. At the beginning of the presentation, I referred to the views that were provided as part of the visual impact assessment. And I said that we had some from Norris, we had some long views from both Cowes and the Solent, and we had some viewpoints from Spring Hill. These are the Spring Hill viewpoints, which show it from the esplanade and then moving round the site and show those wider long views. Again, for locational purposes, this is Spring Hill House or the old convent, and this is the farm. So you're seeing effectively a vista around those elements. Again, you have Spring Hill Farm here, which is around parcel 4, the Spring Hill House just at the edge of this image, and then Cowes in the background of this image here over the water, and you have Holy Cross School just on the boundary of the site here, just outside the Spring Hill estate. And then again, you have the farm cottages alongside which parcel 4 would be located, and West Cowes in the distance. Cowes, apologies. I've included then just some more detailed, more views of the parkland. Saw many of these on Friday, so I won't linger. As stated, this element of the scheme incorporates 4 parcels. Parcel 1 proposed with the shown here, in essence, in more detail than the previous plan. You then have parcel 1, which would provide 55 senior living units in block 3, 2 blocks of flats. One would be 3-storey, one would be 2-storey, or one would be 2 to 3, one would be 2. And then some visuals to show that from West Cowes. If you can make out the wire frames, you have again year 1 and year 12, where you can see the red wire frames of these buildings protruding above and between the trees. Parcel 2 would include up to 25 private market dwellings and a 25 space overflow car park. Parcel 3, which is at the top of the site, if councillors remember, alongside the farm, which would provide a further 17 private market dwellings with 2-storey apartments at the boundary here. For locational purposes, this here is the Northern Cattle Shelter, showing its extended form. So as referenced in the officer report, these units would be visible over the existing Norris Wall. And then a further 8 dwellings, which would be 6 new dwellings and 2 conversions, would be provided within parcel 4, which is in and around the existing farm buildings within the estate. Again, for locational purposes, the northern shelter is at the point of the cursor here. The southern shelter is here. The access road would come in at this point, just alongside the southern shelter. So that directly relates to this point on the plan, with the southern shelter being here. That would be the security office, with the northern shelter, which would be extended and converted into a lodge here. This is the proposed development of this area. This part of the scheme also includes some landscape restoration plans and the incorporation of swales. The swales that you see are the blue on the plan, with the planting being the landscape restoration and screening planting that is proposed around those parcels. There would be some thinning out of the woodland. No, there wouldn't. Apologies. Ignore that comment. No. So the proposal would include some landscape restoration or some planting in and around the existing boundaries of that site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson, for that very comprehensive report. We will move straight on then to the public speaking elements of this application. So if I could invite Mrs S. Burdett to speak, and Mrs Burdett, you have 9 minutes.
Secretary, Isle of Wight Society. The Isle of Wight Society wishes to object to both the full and the listed building consent applications. I'm not going to list all the numbers of numerous policies with which the application does not comply. You have those in front of you already. A major concern is the proposed access through East Cowes Esplanade. Conservation area, described in the conservation area appraisal as tranquil. We disagree with the applicant's statement that this massive development may cause just a few extra vehicle movements, and disagree with his statement that there are numerous spur roads from the Esplanade already. There is one road in and one road out, and an infrequently used single lane to the sewage treatment works. The Esplanade and beach are used very well and recreationally. Parents and children accessing the play facilities, the elderly, walkers with and without dogs, and those with limited mobility all enjoy the Esplanade, which east of Cambridge Road is not a through road, hence traffic calm. Instead, the considerable construction and subsequent service access to so many proposed additional properties will desecrate this tranquil, unspoilt Esplanade conservation area forever. Possible serious damage to the 140-year-old sea wall has not been considered, and we understand in 2025 no further efforts will be made to maintain this sea, which supports the road on made-up ground. The road itself regularly floods in storms and high tides. And when this happens, would negate access to or egress from the proposed development. The applicant's proposed access road across the locally listed Spring Hill estate to Norris is inadequate and should be included with the full planning permission, as without it the development could not proceed. Regarding our concerns for the Norris and Spring Hill estates, the Norris estate is a perfect example of the Georgian gentleman farmer's and home. Its high landscape value lies in the fact that it has not been altered since its creation in 1798. Development of housing and associated services through the proposed extent on both Norris and Spring Hill estates will be severely damaging to the Isle of Wight National Landscape, Grade 1 listed Norris Parkland, and the locally listed Spring Hill estate. The views of both the estates from the sea and from West Cowes are at present unspoilt parkland and farmland. This would greatly change visually to a built environment if the application were to be allowed. Light pollution would be inevitable. Many of the proposals for the new buildings are just incomplete preparatory sketches, which are completely inadequate for full planning permission, as their interpretation would be very open to conjecture and change. The proposed housing and spa development within the walled kitchen garden would be severely detrimental to the character of that Grade 1 listed structure, which is an example of a combined farmyard and kitchen garden unique in England. For any housing development, vehicular access to the walled garden is inadequate by a narrow gateway designed just for a horse and cart. The changes proposed will damage all the listed garden structures without providing any conservation benefit. The modern 3-storey townhouses proposed to be built nearby will have a detrimental effect on the listed farmyard. They are completely out of character for anywhere on this parkland site. Burrowing under Norris Castle platform to develop underground apartments and the swimming pool may cause damage to, rather than protect, foundations. One of the geologists' reports states that leaving the status quo is probably the safest thing to do to protect the castle foundations. It has stood there happily for 225 years already. The application has contrary statements. These subterranean borough apartments will not be visible from the sea. It also states they will each have sea views. Same is said for the intrusive Crescent development. The views of these developments from the sea and from the listed parkland will be detrimental to the Grade 1 listed castle building itself. The proposed glass pinnacle entrance above the Crescent will be detrimental to all views of the castle. The parking and emergency provision proposed are inadequate and obtrusive in the parkland. The transfer zones mentioned for goods inward that are proposed are not shown on the plans. The Sentinel buildings and the restaurant are all inappropriate. Block of the restaurant, rusty, would be detrimental to the character of the bathing house. Sentinel buildings would impinge on the landscape as seen from the Solent. So many new developments within the Grade 1 listed registered park and garden will cause irreparable damage. The listed buildings and structures will be severely compromised by the changes proposed to them. The cumulative effect of so many poorly designed and unsuitable new buildings, roads and parking areas will greatly damage the integrity and significance of this exceptional estate. The enabling development proposed goes far beyond offsetting the necessary costs of conserving the listed buildings and parkland. To conserve listed Grade 1 or 2 structures, there should be the least intervention necessary. In this application, the proposed intervention in the castle, its kitchen area and courtyard, the walled kitchen garden, the listed ancillary buildings and the grounds far outweighs any conservation benefits. We would beg you, Planning Committee, to refuse this application, these applications.
Thank you, Mrs. Burdett. I'd like now to invite Mr. Julian Adams to speak. Mr. Adams, you have 3 minutes.
I'll keep this brief as I can. My main concerns are the inaccuracy of the wildlife surveys applied in relation to this application, the highway impacts due to the use of the esplanade, and the impact on the wider road network in East Cowes, and the incompatibility between the use of the holiday centre and proposed buildings. Wildlife. In the original wildlife survey, it was stated that there are no squirrels on the 2 estates. My site is overrun with them. I doubt they're coming from the housing estate or the sea. As far as I'm aware, a new and more accurate survey has not been submitted. Highway concerns. I'm especially concerned about the use of the esplanade for a majority of the vehicle access. The impact the development would have on the surrounding road network. This would impact my business. The esplanade is a well-used cul-de-sac road with a high proportion of non-vehicular traffic and a higher than average proportion of vulnerable users, i.e. children and the elderly. Old Road is narrow My guests currently use the road to access the holiday park. The massive increase in the vehicle use proposed in these applications would increase highway risks to the guests at Waverley Park Holiday Centre, as well as those in the Norris Castle Spring Hill estate. I fully support the Island Road comments about the highway risks this proposal will bring with it, if approved. Like Island Roads, I believe the application does not accord with the Island Plan Policy DM2. Incompatible uses between the holiday centre and the proposed housing. The outline housing currently proposed is on the adjacent land to Waverley Park Holiday Centre, and if approved, would result in potentially incompatible uses. People in residential dwellings tend to prefer quiet, yet people on holiday can be noisy. The camping and touring accommodation, which is the noisiest type of accommodation on site, is right on the boundary where the proposed housing is shown in the application. Waverley Park Holiday Centre is an orderly site, but even an orderly site has children and families playing outdoor sports, having barbecues, and tourists arriving and leaving. The tourism activity creates a hubbub of noise which is not normally compatible with residential uses. I am concerned that if this application were approved, it will result in noise complaints from the adjacent occupiers. The application has not fully addressed how noise impact will be dealt with for the proposed residential occupiers, and without that information, the application does not accord with Island Plan Policy DM2. I request the council refuse the applications as they do not accord with the Island Plan or the National Planning Policy in regards to highway impacts, the likelihood of noise impacts on future residential occupiers of Norris Castle Spring Hill Estate, and the risk of harm to the heritage aspects of Norris Castle, other listed buildings on the site, and the designated landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. We now have, in a slight change to the published order, Mr. Clint Wellington on behalf of the applicant. But if I'm going to, could ask you perhaps to switch seats so that.
Sorry, could
Yes.
Mr. Gentleman go first, please?
Yes, yeah, that's no problem at all. In which case, I can invite Mr. Cook. Would you? Okay, Cook, okay, so Mr. Cook, our heritage expert. But I'll give you time to settle yourselves. Mr. Cook, whenever you're ready.
you. I'm speaking today as historic buildings expert and the lead heritage consultant for the applications. I'm also the author of the submitted heritage significance and impact assessments. At the outset, it is important to emphasise that Norris Castle is a truly special place that contributes strongly to the character and uniqueness of the Isle of Wight and to the country. Heritage assets within the Norris estate must be saved for us and future generations to enjoy. Specialness, or significance as planning policy terms it, is reflected by the high designation of the landscape, Grade 1 registered park and garden, designation of the castle and farmstead as Grade 1 listed buildings, and the designation of numerous Grade 2 listed buildings in the estate. However, the landscape and buildings within it are in decline and have been for some time, well before the 2015 purchase by one of the applicant group. Without a viable use, the heritage assets will only decline further. As Mr. Cook will explain, the proposals before you will provide a viable use, the only viable use capable both of conserving the heritage assets individually and crucially as a whole, and thus conserving their group value. These applications have been informed by extensive research and heritage assessment work. This has included the provision of an assessment of significance of the Norris Castle estate, Spring Hill estate and Osborne estate, together with associated appendices, historic building recording of the principal listed buildings within the Norris Castle estate, heritage impact assessment, setting out the impacts of the significance of the heritage assets, an archaeological desk-based assessment proportionate to the current proposals, conservation management plan and separate heritage landscape ecology management plans, and an environmental statement. Proposals have also been subject to detailed and lengthy discussions with Historic England, the Gardens Trust, and the Isle of Wight Council at the application stage. Discussions ongoing during the determination of these applications. King's Counsel, Planning and Heritage Specialist, has also reviewed his intent with the submissions. The process has included input from numerous heritage experts and enabled a thorough understanding of heritage assets and their significance to be developed. In turn, this assessment work has informed the development proposals and the design of proposals. This has allowed for the reinstatement of lost landscape features, direction of new development to areas of lower sensitivity, such as the Southwest Field and Modern Barn area, where it will have a lower impact, and the provision of new development that responds to and reinforces the distinctive qualities of the landscape. The design solution provided is not typical or off the shelf. It's been informed by the character and unique qualities of Norris. We acknowledge that development will change the appearance of the Norris estate and that elements of the development will cause harm in heritage terms. However, in our view, that harm will remain less than substantial and does not reach the very high bar of potential harm. Historic England have stated that the harm to the registered park and garden will be substantial, in part due to the overall scale of development. They've also stated that the development proposed would not be viable and therefore could not deliver the very substantial benefits that the optimum viable use of the proposal. We disagree with this assessment, and our viability consultants has demonstrated that not only would the proposal be viable, but that it is the only use capable of conserving the group, enabling public access and maintaining the Norris Estate's heritage and environmental assets over time. It will also deliver very substantial benefits, including conservation of heritage assets individually and collectively. In terms of the listed building consent application, those works have been informed by the detailed assessment process undertaken described above. As with the wider development, the proposals have been designed to retain
I'm
and
afraid, Mr. Cobb, I'm going to have to draw you to a close on them, and I will let you finish your sentence, however, but briefly, please.
retain and repair those key heritage assets to provide them with their optimum viable use.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb. If I can invite Mr. Cook to speak. Mr. Cook, on behalf of the applicants, you have 4 minutes.
I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant as the viability expert, and I've submitted the report by Urba, demonstrated the proposal is not to use. But first of all, I'd like to say the work done for the council by Aspinall Verde to review my viability assessment is seriously flawed. It's based upon an assertion that's wide of the truth. For example, that the harm to the Norris Castle estate is substantial, but there was no such evidence before the council when Aspinall Verde tendered for the work. Indeed, that judgment only came in April this year because of Aspinall Verde's work. And understanding that the application proposes so-called planning residence is also flawed because it does not. Given that so much turns on the viability of the means of conserving the group of 11 designated heritage assets, it's obviously critical Aspinall Verde's review of my work holds water. It does not. I stress my viability appraisal was reviewed by an eminent King's Counsel, who is a planning and historic environmental specialist, and he was content with my final version. Second, I've tried many times to get an audience with Aspinall Verde and your case officer to explain my grave concerns and trying to find common ground. I've been denied. This is deeply irregular in my experience, particularly where, as here, the differences between us are within margins of errors on most matters. Not all, chiefly the matter of alternatives. Also gravely concerned that written comments on Aspinall Verde work are not reflected in either the officer's committee report nor in any revisions to Aspinall Verde's work. Third, the proposed development falls within the environmental impact regulations. Regulations must be observed with decision on the planning application to be lawful. Viability assessment must also comply with National Planning Practice Guidance and Historic England's guidance. And are also bound professionally by the laws of the RICS. All of these require regard to be had with reasonable alternatives. The proposal that ultimately became the result lies at the heart of the application before you. The process of assessing alternatives began months before the application was submitted. It was out hand in glove with the evidence, options, and our team's heritage expert, architect, landscape and visual expert. Always the objective has been, and it must be, conservation of all 11 designated heritage assets and to cause the least possible harm. Their significance while still resulting in a viable development that is very significant and in needed benefits for the island, over and above the conservation benefits. Yet, Aspen Verde, very surprisingly indeed, suggests a better alternative, the nice room at the visitor centre, which obviously would require a very significant level of grant aid. I investigated the potential of grant aid, and none on the scale such a so-called solution would require. Yet huge sums of grant money would be required to freeze the assets, make the site safe, stabilise the seaward slope and manage the natural environment. There are no answers to visitor numbers and entry fees either. Nonetheless, everybody's gravely flawed criticism of our work has been accepted and ours have been dismissed. True condition between our respective values is just 2% of development value. I've already stated in written correspondence just last Friday that they're largely in agreement with my assessment of values and would be happy to reach an agreement. The current true position between
I have to draw you to a close, but I will allow you to finish your sentence. But
That's okay. So the country position between our respective 5-year study is just 6% of construction costs. This is below the 20% variance sought by Aspen Verde cost consultants.
thank you, Mr. Cook. Mr. Wellington, you wish to speak, sir? Wellington, you have 4 minutes when you're ready.
I do not think it is acceptable to apply generic inflation rates to costs that are 2 years out of date, when we have provided up-to-date, accurate and fixed local Isle of Wight labour costs, materials, storage and shipping costs. We have also offered to undertake all the works up front as a condition of any approval, so clearly no cut and run risk. We have also never had a situation where key stakeholders have refused to engage with us in any capacity. The previous case officer fully supported version 16 and wanted to dismiss any further input from Historic England and proceed direct to committee. We chose to continue to address Historic England's concerns, arriving at a position where they agreed to the scheme subject to independently addressing the proposal. I also think it is crucial that members attend a site visit. So why is 28 days so crucial 2 years, 4 months after submitting this application? The box within the box referred to affects one wall and is an exact facsimile of the ceiling, 100 millimetres below the original, delivering a fire protection system to international codes tied to fully demountable walls and ceiling acceptable in all other Grade 1 listed buildings we have converted. The internal harm is limited to one disabled lift and a small staff toilet, opposed to Historic England's alternative unviable 5-flat option. The glass stairwell in the crescent can be removed, as can the chimneys referred to by the case officer. The impact on the cattle shelters can be removed by not including them. Sarah simply needs to engage with the architect after 9 years and 16 aborted master plans. The lack of final details simply required more input from the case officer. The expert used to advise the Isle of Wight Council, who wrote the study of coastal geology, has stated the castle will be a total loss and the ancient woodland also within 5 years. The coastal erosion will be too uneconomical to repair at that point. The bathing house is 50 metres from the Esplanade landslip, so needs reinforcement, and the woodland is not ancient. The councillors tonight have stated they have highways concerns that Island Roads do not agree with. We have never stated there are no squirrels. The surveyor only referred to seeing one during their visit. The ancient woodland will be a total loss if not addressed, and our proposal was both save it and fence off the whole area as a wildlife sanctuary. We need 28 days to address this subject, only to meet in the value appointed by the LPA at our expense.
Thank you, Mr. Wellington. I'd like now to invite Councillor Tracy Reardon, the Mayor of Cowes East Cowes, to speak on behalf of the parish. Mr. Reardon, you have 6 minutes when you're ready.
I am speaking on behalf of the people of East Cowes with regards to the comments told to us over the last 8 years. East Cowes Town Council have made very detailed objections via our planning consultant to the application, but we want to emphasise the following points. The highway impact on the Esplanade. We have huge concerns regarding the extra traffic this application will generate, as well as Island Road refusal due to substandard roads and visibility displays. Our concern is the impact that the traffic would have at this most important community area is used for recreation continuously by families with small children that would be put at risk in this potentially unsafe area. Our concerns have not been addressed or eased, so we have no choice but to refuse any use of our land to protect and safeguard our community and our beautiful esplanade, which is much used and loved by the community and visitors alike. Impact on the listed buildings. The Town Council are still of the opinion that the works proposed will not enhance the setting of any of the listed buildings on this unique site. In fact, we are worried that they would could significantly harm the setting. The castle. The applicant states that all the works are required to enable investment and protect the listed buildings for long term. The Isle of Wight Council Structural Engineers Consultant Report from HLS stated there are a number of cracks and holes in the floor, not of a serious structural nature, and in general, the structure appears sound. This statement directly contradicts the information that the applicant has submitted about the condition of the castle. We therefore ask the committee to consider if Norris Castle is reasonably sound, why would enabling development be required to save it? I think it's also important to say that on a previous site visit the Town Council attended in 2022, we were pleasantly surprised by the overall condition of the castle. The walled garden. The applicant has proposed 40 buttresses, which will have significant visual effect on the walled garden. It isn't clear why these are needed, and again, it is not in the plan. It will destroy any heritage values. The castle terrace. No structural design information has been provided for the construction of the retaining walls. It is therefore impossible to be sure that the Grade 1 listed building of the castle would be safeguarded. Flood risk. The council's geomorphologist raised concerns that the Castle Point building, that you refer to as the bathing, is within the flood zone and that there is significant risk to users due to the vulnerable coastline. To be free of the flood zone, the floor levels within the Castle Point building would have to be raised by over a metre, and there would need to be drainage plans provided, which do not currently form part of this application. I'll now hand over to Councillor Palin.
Thank you, Councillor Reardon. Councillor Palin. Excuse me for a minute. Yes, I'm going to defer to Ms Wilkinson on a point of information in relation to an important matter.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, one of the comments in public speaking just then referred to 40 buttresses along the garden wall. There would not be 40 buttresses along the garden wall. I believe there would be 2. So just to clarify, point of fact,
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you.
Councillor Palin, Deputy Mayor of East Cowes, and speaking on behalf of the parish, 6 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to thank Councillor Reardon for starting this off for us. Committee members, I would like to express the East Cowes Town Council and community's concerns over the fact that this site has been parcelled off and has multiple owners. This could mean that the housing scheme is built, but the essential and much needed repairs to the listed buildings may not. We are also increasingly concerned that the applicant hasn't detailed alternative approaches to protect the setting of the Grade 1 listed buildings, designated heritage assets on the site, other than submitting the housing scheme. The Isle of Wight Council commissioned the Aspinall Verde report, which states, whilst ERBA have discussed some alternative sources of funding, it is not clear they have made any definitive attempts to secure these alternative sources. Additionally, we consider that a number of alternative solutions may have been dismissed without sufficient scrutiny. We know that when the site was purchased in 2015, around a dozen or so purchases were interested, each of which had their own set of plans. Therefore, we know that individuals, including collective families here on the island, came up with alternative ideas, and we cannot fathom why the applicant has not done so this far down the line. It leaves us to believe this is simply because they are only interested in the housing development and seemingly not interested in intending to restore or preserve the heritage assets. Focusing now on the housing section, there is no proper justification for the housing on the site, as these are not for enabling development stated within the Aspinall Verde reports. If there is no justification for them to protect the heritage, then they should be refused outright. The housing development carries huge environmental concerns. As mentioned briefly by Councillor Reardon, there is a major flood risk in the area, which will be exacerbated by this housing development. There will be an increase of water runoff down into the fields. into the woodlands where we previously experienced land instability, onto the esplanade of well-used recreation space, and into the neighbouring business which we heard earlier. As far as I can see, and we've been made aware, there is no plan to address that. The housing on this site will not be affordable to many islanders. What we will see is executive homes, second homes, and homes for those wanting to retire here. This does not meet the local need of the island or East Cowes. I have previously stated, and will say it here again today on record, that this is acting as if it's a millionaire's playground. But worse than that, it's being pushed through by someone who has acted as if they are a bully and who does not seem to care about our island, the environment, the island's heritage, or our people. There are 2 points that I think is important to set right straight on the record, as we too have been included in the email chains the applicant has sent to you. The first is that the bribe that was presented to the East Cowes Town Council, there are several councillors present, along with our planning agents and the applicant's agents. The town council were offered anything that they wanted, including doing all the clearance on the esplanade, surveys and decorative works in support of this application. The second is that since being elected in 2021, all town councillors have been bombarded with emails. Myself and a fellow councillor have been threatened to be sued for slander when we've been speaking out. We have proof of that, and publicly badmouthed in the press. However, we are here today to stand up for our community. There have been hundreds of objections by our community because they are against this application and what it does. It does not protect our heritage on the Norris site. It does not protect the environment. So to conclude, this application is deficient on so many levels. The highway risk, the flooding risk, putting grade 1 listed buildings and the landscape at increased risk, lack of information about the seawall, multiple owners, all means there are still substantial unanswered questions for this majorly significant heritage asset. Norris Castle is a building on the at-risk register. This poorly conceived application would not necessarily resulting in the listed buildings being repaired to an appropriate standard and could put them at greater risk as we urge you to refuse this application, as do our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palin. I'd like now to invite Councillor Carl Love, because the local councillor, Mr. Love, you have 12 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, everybody, for all of the hard work that you've all put into this. Our officers, this is a project that's now been running for 8 years, so we've come to know the project quite well. I think it's really important to start off by just saying the recommendation by officers is to refuse this application on 16 points. Historic England significantly object to this proposal. The Gordon Society significantly object to this proposal. So do East Cowes people, the Isle of Wight Society, but importantly, there was a reference made to the Garden Trust just now about them being supportive. In fact, what they actually say is the application will cause irreparable harm to the parklands and gardens, and they recommend refusal. That's what it says in line. ANOB, Outstanding Area of Natural Beauty, also say they consider it will be an error and do harm to most or all of its assets. Then we come on to Isle of Wight and Isle of Rhodes, who also recommend refusal. Now, there's a lot in this application, and I do realise that there's been a lot of time spent on it. But the fact is, whilst people say, whilst we haven't got all the documents, these people are the experts, and it's their job to provide all of the documents. And we've heard how completely inept a lot of the documents are. When Mr. Wellington's team came to the island, I was really pleased, really pleased, because we've got somebody who I thought knew something about this castle and about castles, because he's got a castle in Scotland, and it's very similar. Or he had a castle in Scotland, now no longer part of that. It's still surrounded by scaffolding and not complete 20 years after because of various different problems with issues in the community and companies and insolvency and various different things. These are the people who are coming to our island to do this castle. I'm hoping that they have demonstrated, which I don't believe they have, that they've got the finances in place to be able to deliver. What I would say to you is, and I want to concentrate upon the actually the financial aspects of this proposal. When they came here in 2015, it was bought in Mr. Edward Wellington's name, and now it's in Mr. Wellington's name and other people. They had pre-sales information, which says to them, there's very little development that can go on this site because it is nationally important. They were told that from the outset. That's really important to remember. And they were given that advice, but they've chosen to bring forward a plan which I believe is completely inappropriate. Not just because we don't want it because it's a hotel, but it's completely inappropriate to the landscape, the setting, and of course the castle itself. So I will concentrate on their financial statements, but broadly. I'm not an expert. I'm not pretending to be an expert. Okay. So their report from URBA says, it's been presented, that when it's all finished, it will be £11.1 million in debt of losses when they've completed this. The Isle of Wight Council estimates done by Verde, and I can tell you the pages if you want, says it's going to be £22.8 million in debt when completed. This is my problem. Who in their right mind would invest into a castle that is going to be in debt and not recover any money at all at the end? That's the first point. The second point I want to make is that the castle has been split into multiple business companies. To be fair, I don't know what that's about, but there's at least 7 of them. It's been split into multiple land registry areas now. Why? If you're going to invest into something so significant, why would you register to break it up potentially? So those are great concerns to me, because that doesn't indicate any confidence in being able to deliver. That's before we talk about this wonderful hotel. So this wonderful hotel being mentioned is, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is Marriott.
Am I allowed to?
No.
Not at the moment, but Marriott, okay, but it's the Marriott design or a large.
I'm not allowed to
No,
respond.
that's okay. No,
Can I
that's
just ask members of the.
a large company. Okay, a large company is going to be doing this this development. 75 rooms, the largest practical 5-star Stratford hotel on the whole of the south coast, on an island. There's no evidence that this will even be successful. It's going to have to be full all the time in order to support their heritage assets, isn't it? Otherwise, it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, what happens? It collapses. If it collapses, what happens? The estate gets broken up. So let's talk about this very, very briefly now. We have Barton Manor, Osborne House. We have Norris Castle and Spring Hill. Take away the fact that Queen Victoria lives at Osborne House, Grade 2 listed buildings. Would you build this in front of Osborne House? Would you? That's a Grade 2 listed site. This is a Grade 1 listed site. The highest protection anywhere on this island. There isn't another. There's only one Grade 1 listed landscape. So we've got some real concerns there, some massive risks. Access, you've already heard about access. My community, and I declare I live in Old Road, I declare that. There's no pavements in Old Road. They're proposing to bring construction traffic down through the town to an island gateway, which is already struggling with traffic. What effect will that do? It'll push it down Old Road and other community roads. And in their reports, they say no residential roads will be affected. Well, actually, Old Road is affected because you're bringing traffic up there or proposing to alter the junction to take it down the road. We will lose a lot of parking. We will have to lose parking in order to make that access. The esplanade is 5 meters wide. What's the average width of a dustbin truck? It's 3.4 meters. That means 2 vehicles can't pass along that esplanade. That esplanade is also used directly where they turn off the esplanade up to Castle Road, up to the sewerage works there, is at the bottom you'll see there's a slipway there which is used regularly. Direct access to people on a downward hill could go straight forward and hurt people potentially. And the road itself, which my colleagues announced has already referred to, Cameron. Actually, we own a third of that road. That third of that tarmac is owned by us. We have it on the land registry. It's owned by us and Isle of Wight Council. They've said they want to use 2 meters of our land. We've made it clear right from the beginning, no, because it's an important leisure area given to the people of East Cowes, completely natural in a conservation area. And if they build this road, we will have to fence that in order to protect the safety of our community and children. That is not acceptable. That is not what that area is for. Along New Barn Road, we've already heard that, very narrow, very difficult to get in. So more problems. But they knew all of this before they purchased this castle. Okay? Now, I'm not against the small bespoke hotel. In fact, actually, why won't they use the Spring Hill estate, which is part of their property, in the Spring Hill house? It could accommodate 40 people, perhaps 40 rooms, as ancillary accommodation. They're not doing that. They've got that opportunity. We've heard about the, as Cameron Palin has said, there are other people waiting in the wings. We know that there are people waiting in the wings because they don't believe that this plan will happen either. And yes, having a nice hotel will bring some kudos to our community. But I don't believe it's remotely sustainable as a project. It's just not remotely sustainable. If there is so much risk to it, I have to say no. That's before I say to you, what are the promised jobs that are in this application? Well, Marriott Design uses people from all over the world to do their work. So that'll leave my community, who were disrespected significantly by these people, doing the washing of the clothes, the sweeping of the grounds, making of the beds. Okay, there will be some jobs. And our taxi drivers, well, they'll have to upgrade to limousines, won't they? Because we were told this is a gated community. That is what we've been told. And the fact that they've got security huts going in tells you that it's a gated community. Okay, so therefore we are not welcome. And that has been made clear to me. Now, I have met with this man on more than one occasion. And because you've had that, I met with them at the town hall at a public meeting. I met with them and his officers online during COVID to look at these plans. I went to the Sea Breeze. I went to meetings and therefore, sorry, that's fine. And therefore, the fact that they are saying that we have not engaged is completely untrue. We put suggestions and alternatives to them and they've refused them. They've ploughed on anyway. As for the terrace in front of the, you know, the, sorry, I've lost its name now, the Castle Terrace and Crescent, the reports say that castle is absolutely stable. It is in such a bad state because they have not maintained it previously to these owners, to be fair, and currently, to the point where Isle of Wight Council have had to issue orders to improve the castle, to do the essential work. That doesn't fill me with confidence that they will actually get on and deliver anything. So that castle terrace in a landslip area of significant area could destabilise the castle itself. Now, they will argue, of course, they're going to put all sorts of things in there for it. I accept that that's possible. But how reasonable is it to think that you would actually dig into a landslip area with all of these properties which they say they're going to house in every bit of that estate? That is not reasonable. That is not preserving the history or a grade 1 listed landscape, is it? That is destruction. And I would accept some of their ideas, but it's just, you know, this is too big a scope. This is too big a step. And I'll say what I think they're after is the view. The view is there. The problem with, and another problem for this is it's a hybrid application. In fact, really, it should be an enabling application from the outset because they're using housing to do the castle and to do the repairs. I don't want an enabling, I don't want an open-ended outline planning application, because that gives green light to build anything you want in the future. And if this castle,
Councillor
sorry,
Love, I will have to draw you to conclusion. I will let you finish your sentence briefly, please, though.
so if this castle is going to be viable or not viable, it doesn't matter if it's 11 million or 2 million. If it's not going to be viable, then what they're going to do, they're going to apply for more housing. Thank you very much, Chair. I urge you to reject
Thank you,
this
Councillor Love.
application.
Thank you. That concludes the public speaking element of this agenda item. Given the time, I'm minded to have a short break for essentially 9 minutes, so until 6 o'clock. But if I could remind colleagues, please not to discuss this application matter at all. Thank you.
Oh, the shape. I did think the shape. I would. You could crack that one.
Well, we all seem to be back slightly earlier, so we will start. If I could remind all members of the public, I appreciate this is a febrile environment, but you are here merely to observe, and there is a process to follow, and we will absolutely follow that in good order. We move then to the next element of this application, which is questions. I'm quite keen, as usual, to keep those two parts demarcated, I think particularly because of the complexity, as much as possible. So any questions from colleagues? Councillor Jones-Evans.
If officers could clarify the confusion that's come into my head after speaking regarding the viability of the scheme. Vis-a-vis this information about it being broken up into separate parcels of land and potential companies. Would this affect the overall viability, given it's one or two applications, but everything seems to sort of hinge on each other for the overall delivery of the scheme. So that does cause me a bit of concern trying to understand that. And should that be an issue for the committee? Is that a material planning consideration, I guess, is the nub of my question.
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. They're two separate matters, really. So the scheme viability is one thing, and there is a dispute between the applicant's consultants and our consultants in terms of the viability of the scheme. That's discussed in the report, where those differences lie in terms of those costings. In relation to the land ownership, it's a tricky one. Land ownership isn't a material planning consideration, so anyone can submit an application on land they don't own. We are aware that this site has been split into multiple land parcels on land registry, but it's not, that doesn't impact on the application and the submission, as it were, if that answers your question.
Yes and no. I get it's more of a legal position. I guess I'm trying to work out if one element is going to money from one element, or the earnings from one element is going to support another element. You know, obviously the extensive works need to be done. That causes me some concern, I'm guessing, for the overall scheme about it. So thank you for your assistance.
Certainly, if I can.
Please, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. If the application was approved, it would be subject to a legal agreement, which would require elements to be done at certain points. And then obviously, if we got to a point and there was more of the proposed housing needed to be constructed, or more of it was constructed than the works that had been undertaken, or however that was phased, we would then, we would have a legal recourse to take action to then stop what was being built, which wasn't in accordance with the legal agreement, to get stuff that was required to be built done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Additional questions? Councillor Price.
Yeah, my question's regarding the fact that we didn't have a site visit. Now, it's not a mandatory requirement for us to carry out a site visit as part of this planning committee. But as lots of members know, it's been the convention to do that. And being familiar with the site is hugely important. Any site visit I don't attend with the planning committee, I do my own visit to. While I can't necessarily go deep into people's properties, you can certainly have a good look around. And I will always wear my identification. If anyone asks me, I'll tell them while I'm there. This is a huge scheme to try and understand. Now, I'm actually fairly familiar with the Norris Castle site, I've got to tell you, but from things previously in life, but to not be able to see it as it is, not be able to understand all of those aspects of this huge application from the site, is just bizarre, really. So my question is, why didn't we have a site visit? What were the reasons for that? And what is the officer's view on how complicated this is, and how that would potentially adversely affect a decision for or against this. But I must say, I think we had a pretty long session, as we have done today, and we were walked through the site from a virtual perspective, absolutely incredibly by our planning officer, and I can't thank the officers enough for the work that was put into providing that. But the fact remains, it's not the same as a site visit. So I'm just interested to know, and I think it should go on the public record as to why we weren't able to have a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Mr. Thorser.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Price. We were not permitted access to the site visit on the usual timings. We were offered an alternative date further into the future, but officers considered that that wasn't necessary. As you might remember, well, as you set out, Councillor Price, a site visit is not mandatory, but obviously what all members of the committee need to do is satisfy themselves that they know the site sufficiently well to make a decision, hence the virtual reality tour, as it were, on Friday morning. Almost akin to back in those darker days of COVID, when we didn't have site visits. As we've said, there is no requirement to do that. So ultimately, officers have provided what they considered or hoped would be sufficient information to councillors to enable them to satisfy themselves so that they can make a decision based on the information in front of them.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Does that answer your question? No follow-up? Additional questions from colleagues? None, in which case I would propose we move to the debate element of this, which is not to close down questioning of officers, of course, but who wishes to commence? Well, Councillor Jones-Evans, please.
As we've heard, those who've been on playing for a while, just interested in this site. This has been a long time coming. It's really hard to even put into words what I want to say about this in a way, because of the enormity of the application. With the enormity from what I've seen, read and heard, damage that is going to be potentially inflicted. It's very special site. Two grade 1 listed building areas and the landscape area itself. From what I've heard and seen and read, I do believe it is substantial harm. I, of course, would love to have a wonderful 5-star resort on the Isle of Wight. You know, it's great that people think the Isle of Wight is a place where we can attract such clientele and they can enjoy the beauty of our area, of course, you know. But is this the right place? I mean, I was actually going to ask the question about sequential tests actually for a hotel complex, because that would be quite interesting in my head. You know, could this need be satisfied somewhere else that wasn't in a particularly outstanding and nationally important site? So to save all your ears, I am satisfied with what I've seen, read and heard regarding supporting the officer's recommendation of refusal. So that will be my proposal when you get to that point, Chair. I'm happy.
Thank you. Are you submitting that as a formal proposal now, or waiting to hear what?
Take it now, then I'll.
Well, I'm happy to have it on the floor if there is a seconder for that proposal. Councillor Andre, seconded. Do you wish to speak in support?
The right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, going back to the enormity of this this scheme, there's frankly, from my perspective, I consider myself an experienced member of this planning committee. I don't think there's enough information. The heritage element of it, while enabling development, can work really well for preserving a historic building. I don't think we've been shown enough of what can be saved and what is there to be saved. You know, for instance, you know, some of the pictures we saw with some of the infrastructure inside the buildings, you know, there's no real detail on how that would be restored and kept in place. You know, there's significant bits that I saw in those pictures that, you know, if you, for instance, go into Battersea Power Station now and you see all some of the original workings that are still in place, you know, I'm sure that there were things ripped out of that building that people didn't want ripped out of them, but you know, marvelous on a grand scale with the heritage in many ways intact. You know, this site has, as someone else pointed out, been virtually untouched for over 200 years. If you save a castle that stood there for 225 years with most of its buildings, and build a load of houses just to keep it there, seems like an absolute travesty. It's a total disrespect for what's there. This estate should be accessible to the public in some way. It could be a viable attraction in many ways. It's right next to a hugely viable attraction next door. You know, I don't agree that to make the I don't agree to keep the castle secure for years to come. This scheme will deliver that. We understand that, you know, with the possible loss at the end of the scheme, it's never going to be viable anyway. I know that's not necessarily a part of our decision tonight, but viability is of course a planning matter. I don't agree that putting the castle into a managed decline is the best course of action. I think that would be, again, a big mistake. But then at the moment it's in unmanaged decline anyway, so it's declining at a rate that will ruin it over a short space of time if something's not done. But I don't agree this scheme is the right scheme. Going to the hotel, I think you know, a 5-star hotel on the coast of the Isle of Wight in such an amazing location could be successful. You know, these kind of things, we haven't got something to that scale now, and sometimes if you build these things, the people will come, but the damage that's going to be done in the process of delivering that and ripping the heart out of Norris Castle, I don't think is worth it. I could go on about lots of elements of it, but I'll keep it to what I consider to be my common sense approach with these sort of things. We've listened to so much information. There's a lot to take on. But I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with the officer's recommendation and will support the refusal. Thank you.
You, Councillor Price. Councillor Churchman.
I have rather a late quick question. 5-star hotel, I thought had to have a golf course to be listed as a 5-star hotel. I haven't noticed anywhere on the plans for a golf course. Could officers confirm that or not?
I think that's going to be somewhat outside the remit of material planning consideration, but there's no harm in asking. I don't know whether that's something, I think officers are frantically searching for that information. It may inform debate, but in the meantime, I'll invite Councillor Brodie, followed by Councillor Bacon. Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. I've been relatively quiet on this application, both at the meeting on Friday and today, because to be honest, it's not within my range of expertise overly comment on this application. However, one of the things that strikes me right from the start is why this castle is not in beneficial ownership, whether that's national ownership, English heritage or whatever. If it's so important to our heritage, etc., I'm quite concerned about the ownership of it. I know that's not particularly a planning matter, but it is something that does concern me. The walkthrough that we had with Miss Wilkinson on Friday was superb. I've never been to Norris Castle. I've only ever seen it from a ferry. You know, it's inaccessible to the ordinary people of the Isle of Wight, as far as I'm concerned, and has been in the 35 years I've lived on the Isle of Wight. To be frank, didn't even know it existed for the first 5 or so years, you know, when I first moved to the island, because it's never been accessible to people. And to my mind, a heritage asset like that should be mandatory for the owners to make it publicly accessible. It isn't. This application is deeply concerning to me because of the way in which to me, it just looks as if it's levering in housing development that is entirely inaccessible to the majority of island people. Lots of executive style 4-bedroom houses in a beautiful part of East Cow, the gate on the Springfield estate. You will know one of my prime concerns on this committee is affordable housing. There will be no affordable housing here. I see no real justification why there isn't. If we're going to have houses built in that area, then people should have access to it. I don't accept the viability argument, to be frank. We need homes on the island, and that isn't provided here. I could say a lot more about that. I am interested in the heritage and the history of this country. You know, I mean, my degree is largely history based as well as the political side of it as well. You know, and more the political history than buildings, I must admit. But I listen to other people, and you know, I understand how and empathise with the way in which they feel very passionate about this application. What I was walked through on Friday, what I've read in this report, on the 2 times I've read through this report, what I've listened to today, I thought what Mrs. Burdett said was magnificent in terms of her contribution today, has persuaded me absolutely that I will be voting against this with absolute and utter certainty, despite the fact that I admit I don't have massive expertise in this area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Ms Wilkinson, I could invite you to speak on the 5-star hotel point. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that you do not need a golf course for a 5-star hotel.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to remark, I don't think the Ritz has a golf course, so yeah, I did have the benefit actually last year of visiting this site with a different hat on as cabinet member for Heritage at the time. And it is an amazing site. There's some amazing stuff there. I'm not going to disagree with anything that anyone said so far. This could be an amazing location for a 5-star, probably even 6-star hotel that we've got there. It's in this way. Just put very simply, I think there are a raft of serious concerns. There are serious gaps in the information we've had. There are serious risks. Too legion to mention all this. One of the most important heritage, possibly the most important heritage site on the island, and one of the most important in the country. And as such, I wholeheartedly agree with the officer recommendation. I don't think I need to go into more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Councillor Andre.
Thank you. As Councillor Bacon said, I concur with everything that colleagues have said previously. I'd just like to pull out a couple of points that are particularly relevant, I think, from my perspective. It is highly unusual, as I understand it, not to have a site visit. And as other colleagues have said, an application of this magnitude would have benefited us by having that site visit. Having said that, I need to satisfy myself that I have enough knowledge of the site and enough information to make a decision. And the walkthrough from the planning officer was absolutely superb. In fact, I go so far as to say that in some respects, because she was able to highlight specific elements of this application, I absolutely feel that I have been furnished with the information I need to make a decision. Councillor Bacon mentioned risk. I think it's fair to say that in determining any planning application, certainly from my perspective, it's always a balance and there is always risk But also, as has been mentioned, there are so many gaps in the information. And it doesn't just relate to the buildings, as one of the speakers alluded to. From the ecology and wildlife point of view, I notice there are the very rare pipistrelle bats, and there doesn't seem to be any information as to how sensitively or not issues like that would be dealt with. It's also in terms of a grade 1 listed building. Once that heritage is lost, it's lost. I would just like to read out one particular paragraph, 7.2 on page 35 of the pack, which refers to policy SP4. The core strategy sets out that the council will support sustainable growth in high quality tourism. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. The policy continues by outlining that to reflect the special tourism offer of the Isle of Wight, proposals for tourism-related development should utilise the unique characteristics of the historic and natural environments without compromising their integrity. I believe from what I've seen, from what I've read, and from what I've heard, that it would definitely compromise the integrity of this grade 1 listed, both the buildings and the landscape. And for that reason, I will be supporting planning officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andre. In relation to the site visit, as it's been raised by several colleagues, I think it's fair to say that there was a consensus at the virtual site visit on Friday. I see no one to suggest otherwise, that we were happy in terms of the amount of information that was provided. Now, I don't think anyone here has suggested otherwise, but I think it's useful to ventilate that by way of the public, that was a very comprehensive virtual site visit. And I would concur with Councillor Andre. Actually, to my mind, it gave me better information of the context over a wider level than would have been the case had we been fighting through potential thickets of undergrowth and going into the building itself and looking at. We had a huge amount of information, I felt, and I was content with that. Are there any additional points that colleagues wish to make? In which case we do have a substantive motion that's been proposed. Just going to take advice for one moment. Excuse me.
Only something is covered without the proposals in relation to both applications.
Thank you.
I'm sure it will be.
Yes.
Absolute clarity.
Is that correct, Councillor Jones? Yes. So in relation to both of those matter application numbers. Splendid. In which case we will go to the vote. So those in favour of following officer's recommendations to refuse this application. Thank you.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And that is carried, and I'm not voting as chair, so that is unanimous. Thank you. Splendid. We now turn to Mr. Bolter, who is going to present on the next agenda item. Mr. Bolter, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. It is a little chalk and cheese, I'm afraid, members, in terms of the length of reports. And my paper in front of you is significantly dwarfed by Miss Wilkinson's more comprehensive report. I will certainly accept that. What I would like to do is just draw your attention to a couple of matters, if I may, please. Firstly, that the report is in front of you, following requirement from the Code of Practice for members and officers dealing with planning matters. So we provide an analysis of decisions which depart, statistics which relating to decisions which depart from policy, and decisions against officers' recommendation, and it also highlights the council's performance in relation to planning appeals, which of course will be an indicator of the quality of its decision. I won't take it all personally that half the room seems to have left during my report, but I will plough on manfully. So I think I hope from your read of the report that you can be have comfort and satisfaction in the LPA's performance, given that the quality of its decision making remains well clear of the national threshold in relation to underperforming, and the sanctions that may be imposed if it were to fall below that. Members, we intend to take a deeper dive into specific appeal decisions at our next Wednesday workshop, and that will look back on the year 23-24, so give you something to look forward to in early May. And I will conclude by just highlighting that the report in front of you is for voting and discussion as appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. Well, as we would move anyway to members' questions, that can be in relation to Mr. Bolter's report or indeed anything that colleagues wish to vent on. Seems not. I would simply endorse Mr. Bolter's report and suggest that.
I have the question.
Yes, Councillor Churchman.
Is the planning department up to full complement? Or are you still short of planning officers? Because I know, having read that most councils across the country are short of planning officers. I wonder how we are faring at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. I can take that. Yes, we are not running any vacancies currently in terms of planning officers. We have recently had a successful recruitment to increase the capacity in our enforcement team, which has been thanks to further funding from Ryde Town Council and some legacy funding from the HAS project, and a little bit extra as well from Sandown Town Council. So we've done very well out of that, and that's a really good approach that seems to be gaining a bit of momentum, of course, having been kicked off very well and supported by Newport and Harrisbrook Community Council. In terms of the planning officers, as I've said, we are running no vacancies. So that can be an indicator. That's a slightly different question to, do you have the capacity to do all the things that you both need to do by the statute book and the things that you would like to do in terms of customer care, etc. That is a different question. Perhaps we might pick up on a different day.
Mr. Bolter, any additional questions? In which, Councillor Price.
I wondered if the walk-in planning advice had started. When's that due to start?
The Wednesday walk-in
yeah.
sessions, yes, that has started. That started on the last Wednesday in January. So it's been running quite a while now, and it's been, I'm pleased to report, it's been really successful. So for those that aren't aware, what this is this is a walk-in session where any member of the public or anyone submitting planning applications on the Isle of Wight can simply walk into Sea Close office and have access to a planning officer to seek informal, unwritten advice, discuss potential ideas, options, and any concerns or thoughts that they may have. It's been really well taken up. We're averaging sort of 5, 6, 7 walk-ins a session. And if the success continues, I think we'll be looking at how we may even be able to roll it out even further, because it's been a really positive way of improving accessibility and visibility of planning officers. And it's also, of course, a way in which we're trying to manage all the incoming emails and phone calls, and trying to reduce those wherever we possibly can, so that I can allow our 14 officers who deal with planning applications as much time as possible to actually deal with the determination of planning applications.
Coming back on that, which is, it's great to hear that. I think it probably is a good move, because I think local members often are getting contacted by potential applicants, and it's nice that we can sort of refer them to a service that they can walk into. But is the pre-planning advice,
Was just going to ask.
Service still?
Yes, so the walk-in Wednesdays, we call this the informal offer, unpaid informal offer, if you like, which is there to complement the formal paid for pre-application advice service. That is still very much running and functioning. You may be aware that we have had a peer review in the not too distant future, and part of the work, one of the work streams from the peer review is to look at our pre-application advice offer and how we could improve it and work in terms of engaging the sector and those who use that service has started. So we've got a whole raft of improvements that we'll be looking to roll out over the course of the next year to make it an even better service.
Anything from other colleagues? Splendid. In which case, thank you very much for your time and attendance, and that concludes our session today. Thank you very much.
Great.